You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 15th of September, and this is episode 30 of The Observing Eye. If you're new, welcome aboard. If you're returning, welcome back. As always, I like to begin these episodes with a moment of reflection. So let's spend a few seconds contemplating the good things that have happened this week. And now, a moment for the not so good. As you may have realized by the title of this episode, we're going a little bit off-piste. I'm not going to be talking about things you can use in your own personal development. I'm not going to be diving into psychological tools that can make you a better human being. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about things that you should avoid. And in doing that, we're going to be diving into the world of the cult mindset. Now, unlike other episodes, this is going to be a two-parter because I have a lot to say and I don't want to drag it out into like a long episode for you. So, welcome to A Cure for Wellness, Part 1. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the origins and psychology around the cult mindset. And then in episode 2, I'll be covering how it impacts us in our daily lives without us being aware of it, and some of the solutions that we can employ to keep ourselves safe from the dangers of the cult. So we've all heard of the idea of the cult mindset, but what does it actually mean? So the cult mindset is a psychological state where the individuals who are kind of ensnared in that mindset, they become intensely devoted to a particular group or to a person or to an ideology, often to the point where they are unquestioningly obedient and they develop these really strong emotional attachments. I want to talk a bit about why cults start and some of the psychological motivators for people joining cults, because it isn't all crazy people that join cults, and far from it. Anyone can be coerced and manipulated into that cult mindset when the conditions and the context are right. So let's talk a little bit around what those are so that you can avoid them in future, okay? So many cults, as you've probably seen, I'm sure you've all seen some sort of documentaries or read books or have seen on the news during your lifetimes, because there's been plenty of cults in the past 50 years that have cropped up, and I'm going to be talking about some of those a bit later. But we've all seen the cult. We've all seen what it is, and generally what we see is the outcome, is the ends, the great climax of the cult, which is, 9 times out of 10 pretty horrific for the people involved in it. But cults in their formation, they normally begin because you have someone who's very charismatic, okay? So look at like someone like Charles Manson, for example, yeah? Absolute horror of a human being, but very charismatic character, according to things that I've read and seen around him. So these people, they come in, they're very charismatic, and they claim to have some kind of superior knowledge, some kind of insight, some connection with the divine. Okay, that makes them special, that gives them some kind of wisdom and understanding of the universe that nobody else has, okay? And they generally step into a place where there's like an ideological vacuum. So we're talking societies and communities where sort of traditional belief systems are in flux or they're sort of falling apart. These people will step into that vacuum and they will offer a new way of understanding the world that people want to cling on to because their existing belief system isn't serving them at all. Some cults will just start because they're mechanisms for these charismatic crazes to exert control and gain power, and power being financial, being psychological control, being sexual, all of these things, right? And we can also see cults cropping up in places where there is a strong need for community. So where the social structure, so we talked about the ideological vacuum. There's also an aspect where they can step in when there's like a decline in a social structure. So the existing mechanisms and frameworks of a society are not serving the needs of the community in which they exist. The general kind of characteristics of cult leaders: highly charismatic, highly manipulative, general lack of empathy, and opportunistic, so predatory. These are the people you need to look out for. So why do people join cults then? Because, we all think, I'd never join a cult. There's no fucking way I get on board that crazy train. But people do, and normal, ordinary people do. So what is that? Why do people do it? A lot of it can be around searching for meaning. So people feel really dissatisfied with their current belief systems, their current ideologies, their identity, who they are as a person. They're at like a crossroads in life. So there's uncertainty in who they are and where they fit into the world. And they can become susceptible to the allure, that allure of the charisma of the cult that creeps in. Alongside that meaning, we have the sense that we need to belong. So as human beings, we are, as I've said before, and I'm sure we are social creatures. We form groups, we form tribes around all sorts of things, and we work well when we feel that we belong to something. And cults can create that illusion of a safe communal space in which people can belong and be themselves. It's also evident that people like to be told what to do in some cases. Some people thrive when there is an authority figure telling them that this is what they should be doing and how they should be living, because it takes away the complications and it creates like a safety net, a safe space where they feel like, they're doing what they should be doing, and they're following instruction from someone that they look up to for guidance, they revere them in some way, And then, of course, we have people who are emotionally or psychologically vulnerable, which is probably a lot more than we really give credit to. They can see cults. If they were to cross paths with the cult at times when they are vulnerable, then the allure of that can make them feel like it can solve their problems. It can give them a foundation of stability. Coming back to that sense of meaning, that belongingness. It's a really, really dangerous space to exist in. So what techniques do cult leaders use to lure you in? And not just cult leaders. We're talking those highly trained disciples that come along after them. What techniques do they use? And bear these in mind, because I want you to be able to spot the techniques of the cult at the end of this episode. So we talked about this earlier, that charismatic leadership, the oozing charisma, like a horrible fucking thick viscous treacle of trauma. They come in and present themselves as, the arbiters of truth, and have this sort of authoritative air that they've created, this persona they've built to lure you in via their, just their natural charms. They'll use things like love bombing. Now, love bombing, be aware of, not just cult leaders, just as a side note, be aware of anybody who fucking love bombs. Love bombing is the excessive affection and attention that people give you. It's always a fucking red flag with anyone. Watch out for that. Cults are very good at isolating their members from their support networks. They will cut people off from family and friends so that we aren't able to see or be exposed to a contrary point of view. And, people aren't going to question what we're doing, aren't going to raise the flags. So they like to isolate people. And if you don't have that support network around you, you've taken away the safety net and people feel more vulnerable. So you cut people off from their support networks. There's the indoctrination side of things. So regular meetings and rituals and activities that reinforces the cult's belief system, really just like hammering the message home, getting inside your head. There's financial exploitation. So a lot of cults will require hefty financial contributions from Scientology, which make it really difficult for you to leave because you just don't have anything. You've given them all of your wealth, so you're kind of stuck, and your means of escape are far more limited because you just don't have the resources to get back out of it again. And then there's things like fear and intimidation, which I think we can clearly, I don't need to give examples of that. We all know what that is. And then you've got like information control, where they'll restrict the access, your ability to get information from the outside, which could challenge the ideology of the cult. It could challenge the message that you're being fed. So they're going to restrict your capacity to look at the external world, to get information from the external. So that's some markers, some indicators for you to bear in mind when we talk about, what to watch out for with the cult mindset. I want to give a few examples of some cults that you may well have come across in the past 50 years. So the most recent one that I found was a cult called NXIVM, which was founded in 1998 by Keith Raniere. And it was like a multi-level marketing organization, right? So like a pyramid scheme that offered personal development courses. So watch out for those. None of them are safe. So it started off as this personal development organization. And over time, it turned into a cult with Raniere at the center, who claims that he was one of the smartest men in the world. And I've only just come across him through doing research for the podcast. So he could have made that much of an impact as the smartest man in the world. Just saying. Now, in 2018, the cult collapsed because Raniere was charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and forced labor conspiracies. So that's pretty intense for a multi-level marketing organization. So intense that high-ranking members of his organization, his cult, were alleged to have been branded with his initials and coerced into sexual servitude. Which, that's not what I signed up for when I wanted to do that course on improving my time management. Raniere was thankfully convicted in 2019. So that's the latest one. There's things like, you'll have probably come across Shinrikyo, which was founded by Shoko Asahara. So he's the guy who declared himself Christ and then carried out that sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway system in 1995. So he was caught and executed in 2018. So fairly recently. So cults still exist; they're still around. So you gotta be aware of these. So that was So two examples there with some pretty fucking dire outcomes. I don't really need to talk about Heaven's Gate, do I? Because I'm sure you've all heard that one. That's the one founded by Marshall Applewhite, where he believed that the Earth was going to be recycled and they were going to escape on the comet Hale-Bopp, which, not on the comet. There was a spaceship trailing the comet, apparently, and they all drank the Kool-Aid in the mansion in San Diego. It was a mass suicide in March 1997. 39 people. It's just horrific. It's absolutely horrendous. It's just this again. These are all within recent memory. I remember admiring Hale-Bopp from my garden when I was younger. It was impressive to see, but to think that this was a tool that had been used to convince people that they were going to escape on a spaceship trailing the comet's tail. When you think about it, the amount of power and influence that these cult leaders create in their followers is immense. It's insanely immense. And we can't ignore the power of that. We can look at it from the outside, from the external, like all things as the observer, and go, why the hell do people believe that? But like I said, these weren't like crazy outsiders of society. A lot of these people, they were just like you and I. They were ordinary people who, through circumstance and through serendipity, had run into these cults and been enamored by what they saw and drawn into it. And then once the hooks are in, it's fucking game over. So there's a couple of examples of some cults in very recent memory. I'm going to bring the episode to a close now because I want to move on to part 2 next week. So we've talked about some of the psychology behind the cult mindset. We've talked about some of the tools and techniques that cults use to draw people in and to keep them inside the confines of the cult. In our next episode, I'm going to be talking about how we can recognize the cult mindset within ourselves. We're going to be talking about the dangers of the cult mindset in society and some of the philosophical concepts around self-awareness and critical thinking that will enable us to combat the cult mindset. I hope that's been interesting, and I hope it's been useful, and I really hope that my 4 listeners come back next week for part 2 of A Cure for Wellness. It's been, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for spending your time with me. I always appreciate it. As it's Friday, I'd like to wish you a wonderful weekend. Go out there and try not to get indoctrinated into a cult. At least, question things. Is that mailing list really a cult census? I might even actually next week. I think I'm going to do this next week. I'm going to talk to you about my experience. They're going to fucking come for me for this. You're going to see. I'll get kidnapped in a black van. I'm going to talk to you about my experience when I visited the Church of Scientology, and we'll go into that a little bit because I think that will be quite an interesting insight for all of you around that. Not saying that Scientology is a cult, but, some of the mindsets are similar. So in my opinion, I have to caveat that with my opinion. So yes, have a wonderful weekend. Try not to join a cult, and I hope to see you back next week. Much love, and I'll catch you soon if the Scientologists don't kidnap me.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you found it useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writings or work around psychology and philosophy and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.substack.com, and that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you soon.